What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Philosophical Misfit podcast. Today's podcast is a little bit different. Man, every time I say that, it sounds like I'm getting ready to do like a ad. Today's podcast is brought to you by, but I mean, that'd be cool if this podcast got to that point. But today's podcast is a bit different because it's not just me. And I recorded a dinner conversation. You know, I talk on my YouTube channel all the time about these quote-unquote heated conversations I have with my parents all the time. And so I figured, why not start recording them? So that's what I've started doing, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with these recordings. I don't know if I'm going to put them on this podcast or if I'm just going to make another podcast for like my patrons only or what. But I wanted to share with you all the first conversation that I recorded with them, and it was over dinner. It was, as we were eating. So it's actually, it's actually so annoying because you can hear like the chewing, and you can hear like the silverware rattling. You can't hear all the chewing. It's not that bad. But if that really annoys you, then you might be aggravated or just annoyed with like the first 15, 20 minutes of this recording. That and my dad like is talking with his mouth full pretty much the entire time. So that's fun. But this conversation really wasn't heated, but it was a really good conversation. And I don't know if I've already mentioned, you might notice a downgrade in the quality of microphone today. I'm using the microphone, the quality in sound, because I'm using the microphone that I usually use when I'm doing YouTube videos, not podcasts. When I didn't have time to go to the studio this week and record with a good podcast sound-wise with my quote-unquote good microphone, even though it is like an incredible microphone. Didn't have time to do that, so that's one of the reasons why I'm choosing to share this with you all. But also, it's an interesting conversation. And so the conversation starts out with us talking about sainthood. My dad sits down, and it's kind of pretty typical. It's not a, hey, how was your day? But it was like, so I was studying sainthood today and what that means in the Catholic Church, and what you have to do to be dubbed a saint in the Catholic Church. So we start off the conversation with talking about that, and then we end the conversation with talking about the theology of suffering, and just talking about the suffering in the world, suffering in the church, and a whole bunch of other things in between. But there's a story that is in this conversation that gets brought up, but the story is never told, so maybe for context, I just wanted to briefly tell you the story. So my dad has a friend that does missionary work somewhere. I'm assuming it's the Middle East. I don't even know that for sure. He's not actually allowed to say where it is. But the story goes like this. There is this head terrorist, essentially, that is that's in the same place, the same town, the same village, wherever it is, that they're doing their missions work. Or they're doing, something like that. I'm going to butcher the story because I'm not super familiar with the details, and I don't think he told us a lot of the details. He just told my dad the brief summary of the story, basically. So there's this head terrorist guy, and they want to tell him about Jesus. They want to tell him about the gospel. And so they send one of their missionaries to his house to sit down, have tea or have dinner with him, whatever the case may be, and tell him about Jesus. And so that's what they did. They sent a guy. He had dinner with them or tea, whatever the case was, and sat down, told him about Jesus, told him about the gospel. So he left the house, and when he left the house, he got shot and killed in this guy's front lawn. And so these guys were like, all right, let's send another one. So they send another guy to go to his house, have dinner with him, tell him about Jesus, tell him about the gospel. And this guy, as he's leaving the house, he too gets shot and killed, dies in, his front lawn, the terrorist guy's front lawn. And so they send another guy. And this guy, goes to his house, has dinner with him, tells him about Jesus, shares the gospel with him. And as he is leaving the house, he too gets shot and killed in his front yard. And so this happens for 19 different people that went and attempted to tell this guy about Jesus and share the gospel with him. On the 20th guy that went in, the terrorist dude said, I have shot and killed 19 of your people. Who is this Jesus that you want to tell me about? Like, who is this? And why do you keep sending people back even though I've killed 19 of your people? And the guy simply replied, because we're not afraid to die for what we believe in. They believed that it was that important. And so through that, I think it's brought up, martyrdom is brought up in the conversation as well. Dying for what you believe in. I think that might lead to the suffering theology part of it. But yeah, it's not a heated discussion, but it was a very interesting discussion to say the least. So if you can bear the chewing and the constant silverware clicking, clacking around, and the whole thing was recorded on my iPhone. So there's that as well. So if you can bear that, it's for the first 15 minutes, then you're good to go. But also, my dad's the furthest away from the microphone, but he was the one. I think there was like chips right beside him, so he's just he's just chewing the entire time. It's great. So yeah, hope you enjoy this conversation. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on it. And yeah, so if you could get back to me about that, that'd be really cool. But there will probably be more of these. I'm not sure if I'm going to, like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep uploading them on this podcast or if I'm going to make it only for patrons on my Patreon page. So yeah, this is the conversation, my typical conversation at the dinner table with my parents who are pastors. So, enjoy.
You have to have been dead for 5 years.
For what?
Sainthood in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And you have to have lived a exemplary life, an honorable life with Christian values. And you had to have be set aside as a holy life. I don't know what the difference is. Exemplary, like heroic. You had to do something heroic.
Not a miracle?
Well, that used to be the three, and then this Pope added two more. You had to have done at least 2 miracles.
Yeah, that's what Chuck always said.
Really?
Yeah, so we used to say Saint Israel, Saint Nathaniel, Saint Chuck.
Oh, okay.
It's just like, we made it.
Yeah. Right. That's in there, man.
But
You have to have done at least 2 miracles.
I didn't know that there was other prerequisites on top of it.
Yeah.
So what would he classify a miracle?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what we took it as, because we were just joking about it, was praying for pain and it going from a 10 to a 5.
No. Mm-hmm.
But I think miracle and what the church would talk about is like some, levitating or, feeding 5,000 or, like a Saint Teresa oil coming out of the hand or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You mean a physical healing wouldn't qualify?
No, I'm not saying a
Yeah,
physical
it would.
feeling wouldn't qualify. I'm just saying possibly a physical healing that's like growing a limb out. Or it's not like pain dissolving. It's like a tumor, like,
Right.
something crazy.
Because really, those other things you mentioned, those would be more like wonders rather than signs. Well, yeah, signs, wonders, and miracles. I guess the Catholic Church doesn't differentiate.
It depends. I wouldn't go so simplistic as saying pain leaving is not a miracle. But
No.
It's a blessing.
mm-hmm.
What?
A plane leaving, that's a blessing.
No. But is it defined? What, I guess, what's the what's defined as a miracle?
Right.
Did
It didn't say.
no.
It didn't say. It's just that you had to have done 2 miracles. Dead 5 years.
What? Huh?
You had to be dead 5 years
What do you mean?
in the Catholic Church in order to get sainthood. You
can't-
have to have died. You can't get sainthood while you're living.
Really?
So basically, it's all based on deeds. Sainthood is based on deeds. But in the Christian faith, everybody that is born again is called a saint.
So
So
what's
it's based on
okay?
position.
So that's the Catholic Church's all those 2 miracles and whatever.
Yeah.
Catholic Church says you're a saint. But so did you research in like because Christians all saints. So what's the prerequisite for that, or is it just that's who you are?
What? Yeah, when you're born again, yeah, you're considered a saint when you're a follower of Jesus.
Wonder what the Catholic Church thought about that.
So for Christians, it's not based on performance.
Right.
It's based on position.
Yes,
That's the difference.
it's based on position. The Catholic Church is based on performance.
I mean, but there's got to. Oh, okay. So I'm going back to the Philip Yancey book because that's what I'm reading. Obviously.
It's fun.
And he was saying, I'm convinced that dude is a cessationist.
Okay.
I'm convinced. Based on the last 2 chapters I read about the Holy Spirit coming, I'm like, yeah, this dude is a cessationist. But he was saying that when the Bible says God subject himself to them, that he was saying, like he was talking about in the book, that kid that came up to him with all these questions, with all those questions, doubting everything, doubting God, and he said Richard will never see a feeding of the 5,000. He'll never see this. He'll never see that. All these miracles, but yet he will see my face. And how like God knew, or God knows that he's going to be misrepresented by Christians, by his people, because they're not obviously not perfect in any of that.
Right.
So, like, I mean, saints, yes, but imperfect, and I mean, it's like, I mean, he was saying God knows how that the Christians are gonna screw up. They're not gonna, like, be able to portray God as God, So, I guess what I'm getting at, my point here, is like, sure, you're a saint by position, but doesn't there need to be an action to follow that?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Basically, that position and that you have saints described in the Bible is you've got a position, but then you are set apart to live a holy life.
okay,
So that's the holiness part or the saint part. I mean, not that it is a position.
Yeah, but
in that position, you set yourself apart to live a holy life. Not meaning you become monks or priests or whatever. You set yourself apart to follow Christ in whatever position whatever you do in life.
We've been given
Your
access.
calling.
We've
Yeah.
been given the potential to walk it out.
Right.
We still have to walk it out.
Yeah.
so what would you say to some buddy who says, I'm a Christian and I'm a saint, but doesn't walk it out? Are they really a saint? Are they really a Christian?
Well, case in point, he called the Corinthian church saints in the opening chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those guys, he's calling them on the carpet. I mean, a lot of them were carnal Christians, I would call them.
Mm-hmm.
So, he still called them saints.
Well, it's just like you can.
I mean, but how much of that, I mean, obviously I don't know Paul.
Right.
I know him personally. But how much is that, like, I mean, Peter, whenever he comes up to me at church, hey, brother. Like, I'm like, I get what he's insinuating. Or like even Chuck calling me Saint Nathaniel, meaning the two miracles. I'm like, okay, is there a part of that is like, because you've professed this is what I'm going to call you?
Well, the interesting thing is that it says that when it in the Bible that it normally there's only really one time that saint is singular. It's always plural. It's like saints. In other words,
there's only one time that it's singular.
Yeah, but when it says that, it says it talks about it's in the opening chapters of one of the Paul's letters. It talks about greet the saint in the community or something like that. It's like the indication there's more there, but it's singular, but most of the times it's plural. Greet the saints.
So where say that one more time? Where was the one place that it said saint?
I forget. It's
one individual then.
Yeah, it's one individual, but the indication was there's more there. I don't know. I have to read it again. I saw it. I was like, oh, okay. But so when it uses the word saint, it doesn't really. It's not really talking about one person. It's talking about a body of people,
like the saint.
the saints.
I'd be interested to see the Greek, if that one time that they used it singular instead of plural, that it's actually the same exact word that it's always been used.
Why would that make a difference?
Because, I mean, not that it would, but I don't know.
When it used the singular,
Well,
the context was there was more. There was one of many. It's kind of what it was. One of many.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine what's his name? Disappointment with God is a sensationalist.
Philip Yancey?
Yeah.
You would say
sensation.
there's no end. Cessation.
Cessationist. I would imagine he probably is.
Yeah.
That's all the doubting.
If that's the case, then I can see how he would entertain that God is still learning because he doesn't have the Holy Spirit to be the bringer of truth.
Because he doesn't?
Because he doesn't believe that the Holy Spirit is the agent by which we grow and learn and have connection with God.
How would that discredit what he's saying, that God's on a learning curve?
To make it more personal, you have to leave out the Holy Spirit.
No, I don't think, from what I'm gathering, or from what the cessationists that I have talked to, they still think God's personal. They don't reject that.
That's what my brother
He
said
just
was.
doesn't do miracles today?
Yeah.
Okay. Because they're not needed because we have the Word of God?
Yes.
Well, but
That's what they
also,
say.
I know, yeah.
but also, there's no such thing as that inner revelation.
Yeah,
It's very
you have to
limited.
find it, right? You find it just in the Word of God and that's it.
It's all what's written.
Mm-hmm.
There's no intuition or sensing.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps a safer way to live, but yet it's more limited. And
Well, but then it depends.
More boring.
It's totally dependent upon our ability to learn,
that's true, you're right.
and it could disqualify
It's totally on
people who
knowledge.
don't have a high IQ or aren't educated or whatever because you can't learn all the knowledge.
What do you mean? That the cessationist has?
Yeah, based on
If
knowledge.
you are saying that it's all in the written word, that's where.
Well, I just think if like cessationism, I forget where I mentioned this. either mentioned it or I just had a thought. Maybe it was just a thought that I had. But cessationism, if that is that, well, it can't. I don't think it could be the case, because then that would really just present definitively and even empirically, if that's the truth, Christianity as just like any other religion.
Based upon a law,
it becomes a religious philosophy to live by.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer like spirituality, like what you were saying with me, that Christian, like Paul said, the term Christian, it's actually a worldly term. Like that's what
was given to them by the world,
not by God.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Christianity, by the sound of that, is inherently spiritual and less religious. I mean, if I have that right. And so, if sensationalism is the truth, to me, it doesn't give Christianity any sort of, because that's even an argument that people have for Christianity. It's like, no, God is real. He's personal. You can experience Him. You can, like, it's an experiential thing. But, and people have to back that up, and they can't always do that, or can't, I guess. But, yeah, it just becomes, if sensationism is that truth, it just fits right in with the mold of everything else.
You learn to accept it.
And that's what I told Chuck when I was at school. I told him, I was like, I told him even there, I was like, I don't want any or want to follow anything that's not like an experiential thing. Like that ruins it.
Yeah.
That's not experiential?
Yeah, well, any faith that's not alive and
Oh, yeah.
personal, yeah. It just becomes, what philosophy were you?
But, I mean, even people that are, say, Muslims, I mean, so what they've been taught is if you read the Quran, study the Quran, and you do what it says, that you are a spiritual person.
What do they define as spiritual?
Yeah.
The Quran, that's what they've been taught.
They define being religious as being spiritual, because you're following the rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all that they know.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
I'm told that a Muslim never expects for God to speak back to them. They expect to pray.
Is the oven still on?
Yeah, my bad.
They expect to pray and be religious at it 3 times a day, whatever.
Mm.
But they never expect any return.
That's the shock when they have.
That's what's so profound about Christianity for them.
So when Jesus shows up in their dreams and starts talking to them, then it stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Dad shared the story on Sunday about the 19
Yeah.
guys that went in. Man, he hit some zingers on Sunday.
Some zingers?
Yeah, I mean, called people to...
Basically, I was talking about Revelation 12:11 that says, "You're overcomers by the blood of the Lamb, were you testimony, and not living your life unto death."
Mm-hmm.
And I've said that since my time in Dallas, that phrase, "not living your life unto death," has become so real to me, as far as what does that mean for me to live that
Literal.
in America.
Literal and physical instead of just a spiritual thing.
Well, I don't really want to live it spiritually, because nobody ever quotes that third part of that verse.
No, I'm saying, yeah, but you could quote that verse. What's that verse again? Where the power of the Lamb, word of your testimony.
By the Lamb.
Loving our lives not unto death.
And loving like you're not, that's what it says, and they shall overcome him, the devil.
Yeah.
It states the devil, the accuser. So, and the verse before that talks about 2 verses before that, there was a war in heaven between Michael and the devil lost. He was thrown out of heaven. So it says he was cast down to the earth. And then it says that Jesus came with his kingdom on the earth. So when the devil is ruling the earth, it says he's deceiving all the people. So when Jesus came, he came with another kingdom and higher authority to defeat the devil on earth. And so then it says, and they overcame him. It's clearly talking about the devil. Believers of it by the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony, and not living their lives unto death. But we in America only do the first 2, and we leave out the third.
Mm-hmm.
Because we live under a canopy of safety and security.
Well, it's not a bad thing.
What?
That we live in a canopy of safety and security.
No, it's not a bad thing, but then we develop doctrine based on that.
Sure.
Like...
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. The what I was saying is that some people could interpret that as a spiritual death instead of a literal death unto death.
Except that in Revelation that it talks about the martyrs, the ones who give their lives.
Yeah, that's not what... Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't think that's the intent of the writer.
Sure. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying
that what you're saying.
That people could interpret it that way.
Yeah.
That's how I've always interpreted, but not because that might not be a reality. It's just in America, we're not as close to it. But his point that he brought up on Sunday, because through the examples that he gave, was a wake-up call to, like we call our inconveniences as sufferings. And it's just a reality check that from so many other nations of the, believers in other countries, it is literal. And how American we are in thinking our inconveniences are sufferings of Jesus when they are literally dying and giving their lives for the cause.
Just like that Sheep Among Wolves movie, the women in Iran that are leading the church, discipling the new believers, are mainly women. And they having a talk with their husbands, because they know if they get caught, they're going to be beaten, raped, put in prison, and died, killed. They could be, probably some. And so they just agree that they commit their bodies as a living sacrifice unto the Lord. And when they go forth, they understand that could happen to them, but they're committed to discipling new believers, knowing that this could happen to them. We don't face that in America.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just that's not a bad thing that we don't.
No,
face
it's not
it,
a bad thing.
But
I wasn't going overboard. I'm
sure. No,
I'm
yeah.
just saying that
I'm asking you a question here.
Okay.
I'm saying it's not a bad thing that it's like that, but how in a culture like American culture where we do have that safety and security, do you foster and nurture that mindset to mean it literally? Because, I mean, there are places like, Chicago, the
right.
top murder place,
right.
parts in Los Angeles that not even the cops go because, So how do you, in a country where you are safe and secure, how do you
Well, for me, I go
foster
back to
and nurture?
your suggestion that we spiritualize loving not our lives unto death. For me, it means standing up for what I believe and facing possible rejection, ridicule, scorn.
Death threats.
Yeah.
People run for public office gets death threats.
But I'm not even talking about physical death. We're not even willing to stand up because we're so afraid of being rejected or that someone won't like us or we might lose our job. So if we can't do that, we're not about to take a bullet.
No, sure, but I'm saying people aren't even gonna go into those areas because they know that they're safe and secure. What would possibly make somebody in America go to those places?
When it gets personal.
Yeah, when it gets personal.
Or they have
how
a
do
vision.
You make something like that personal?
Or they have a vision from the Lord. Like there's a lady she's a mayor in California, and she became mayor. She's a Christian, and the town was run by gangs, and so she contacted all the gang leaders, and brought them together and said, "What do you need? There's something that you're looking for that you don't have." And she began to talk to the gang leaders about that, and they began to be honest about what they needed, education and this and the other thing. And she began to work with the gang leaders, and all of a sudden, the fighting and killing stopped in their town. The crime went down because she started working with the
So
gang.
why did she do that?
Why did she? Because she was a Christian, and she also believed that God wanted things different in her town than what was happening. And so
Did it hit her personally, or did it was just a call?
And it was just a call. I don't know. It was personal. I gave the example of about, it's probably, I don't know, 10 years ago. There was a sniper in D.C. and he was taking out people mainly at gas stations. It was an old man and his young son, and they would put the rifle through the back, the trunk of a car. You know where the little symbol is. They put the rifle through that and shoot people at gas stations. And a church actually had their members pump gas for people because they were too afraid to get out of their car at the gas stations. And so that's an example of not loving their life unto death.
Sure.
So,
I'm just simply trying, because obviously, like that story with the 19 guys that gave their life in
Right.
the 20th, you know,
Yeah.
like they, like I asked you, I was like, you know, what kind of guys were those? You know, were they young guys that didn't have anything to lose, or were they all, you know, I mean,
Married with kids?
yeah,
I
sure,
don't know.
you know, we have no idea.
Well, I could
But-
find out.
Well, that'd be interesting to find
Yeah.
out. But how would, like, it almost seems like you would have to be in a situation, you were put in a situation, instead of willingly, like those guys willingly went there.
Right.
But it was also, the territory where they were, it was also, it was life and death.
Yeah.
Supposedly all the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
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 So, obviously, it's not like that in America.
Right.
It's not life or death all the time.
Right.
It's like, how am I going to pay my bills?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of thing. So, how would you go? Like, how would you? I mean, you know, make it personal for one, but how do you get people at a point of these people need to hear this story, and I am willing to risk my life for it because I know it will make a difference, and I know my life won't go unremembered if I die.
I would think different people are motivated. I think there are. I've heard it prophesied that in this generation, there's going to be some that feel called to be martyrs, that they're willing to do that even in this nation, that they would feel strong enough. Obviously, those guys, they had experienced something so real. I think that's one reason when you experience something that's powerful, it'll compel you. I think for other people, it'll take a personal threat for protecting their family that they would be willing to do something like that. I think for others, hearing stories like that can inspire you to want to be someone that could do that. I'm not sure it's going to hit everyone the same way. Because I'm not sure everyone would be able to do that.
Sure. I'm not doubting that. I'm just,
I think that we have to, like I shared in the message, I think that we have to not let our inconvenience be labeled as sufferings.
yeah.
I think that we develop, like one and I were talking when we got home, that, you know, the part of the doctrine behind the rapture is we don't want to experience
You don't want to suffer the tribulation.
the tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
So we make a doctrine to believe that Jesus is going to rapture us out before the tribulation comes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which
really,
only you hear from America.
so really, they're leaving that out. Not love our life unto death. That wouldn't go well in the doctrine of
The rapture.
the rapture,
Mm-hmm.
because they would say, no, Jesus is going to rescue us out. We won't have to suffer through the tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a new
We're
angle.
not
Yeah.
being threatened with life or death, but we are being threatened with our rights being taken away. I mean, it's not on the physical level yet, but that's why people are rising up supporting Trump, because legislation is threatening now everybody. You know, losing our right to bear arms, losing right to even school our own children. I mean, a lot of these things, everyone's feeling it. And so it's taken this for people to even say, oh, maybe I need to get more involved, or maybe I need to vote, but they wouldn't have done it otherwise. I think getting personal, I think that's a primary motivator.
Yeah. Lots of times, I mean, the countries that we're talking about, they don't have any kind of infrastructure in their government like we do. And they don't have a basis, a godly basis, foundation from which it was formed. And so it's very different in those nations in the way that they run. That it's largely tribal. It's through tribes. I mean, you got even Iraq, you got the Sunnis and you got the Shiites and you got the, different factions of Muslims, and they hate each other and they're jockeying.
I just have
for
no
position.
idea, because we're one
Yeah.
of the few countries that have a democracy. We have no idea what it would be like to live in a country that isn't like that.
Yeah, and
Where it's just
and
majority
Kenya,
rules
or the tribe.
most powerful. Yeah, the
yeah,
tribal rule.
it's the tribals. South Africa, it's a lot of it has to do with the tribal families and the feuds that go on for generations and generations.
But the other thing that's missing in the church is we have no doctrine of suffering. We have no theology. All we talk about is being safe and secure and free from trouble, and if you do this, then you'll be protected. Which is true.
That's again living under. It is a blessing that we live under safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
It is a blessing, but then we begin to develop doctrines that say that can't happen to us.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong.
It's not the case.
Yeah. Or that we shouldn't go to places if God calls us there because it's a little dangerous.
Mm. Well, I think the doctrine of suffering, I think we do have one, but it's all emotional. I'm serious.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Ton of
It's
inner
because-
healing, ton of sozo stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we do suffer all the time from our feelings.
Who was it that said
It's
we are
pathetic,
in the most? What was that, man? It was this most unlikely person that said it. We live in the most peaceful times that we've ever lived in, and yet the usage of pain medication is at an all-time high. This is the most peaceful times. There's no wars. There's no, there's hardly any recessions. There's just incredible. But yet in the last, say, 20 years, the usage of medications, whether it's prescription medicine or non, is at all-time high.
I wonder if that might not.
You're like,
I mean,
well, why
if you
is
think
that?
about it, it would be interesting to compare different nations in terms of mental health, the whole emotional part. Because to me, it actually can be very self-centered, because it's all about us. Where when you're in other countries where it's a life or death,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about surviving and making it through, protecting your family.
Yep.
well, I mean, there's people who have videos I've watched that have talked about that. It's not just about, like, they talk about the fight or flight in human beings now, like before it, and still is in other countries, a literal fight or flight because it's life or death. But in America, it really, like, the same response comes from, how am I going to pay my bills this month? How am I going to do, the same bodily response happens, even though it's not a life or death thing, because, and I think maybe that is the reason, because there's because it's like almost this promised utopia of America, of like, there will be no suffering.
Right.
And so when people do suffer, then it's like the biggest disappointment ever.
That's right. Yeah. Because we have such a developed system that if you don't have a job, you get workers' comp, or you'll have workers' comp. You have welfare, you have food stamps. There's all kinds of safety nets that other nations don't have.
Yeah.
You don't have a job, you don't eat. That's not the case in America. You got food banks, you got food stamps, you got welfare, you got disability, you got.
Well, and I mean, I don't think those are all bad things, but it's just showing people are not less able to handle suffering, I guess. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir because I'm the one on anxiety medication.
You're a funny man.
But you know, I think it's commendable though, Nathan, if you, you know, you keep that desire, that you don't shut off emotions either. Because that's what my brother Sam did. I mean, when he became a cessationist, I'll never forget, anytime I hugged him, he was literally a board. He had hardened himself because he was, somewhere along the line, he really got wounded and he got disappointed. And he was never the same. He kept his faith in God, but he would not feel anything. He refused to. And it all came out through his body. Internally, that's what killed him. All these issues that just multiplied themselves. Because he never knew how to deal with all that inner stuff. And he wasn't, I don't know if he was willing to or not, but that's something I don't want to see. Because my dad was the same way. It wasn't until later years he talked it out. Because we are spiritual beings. I mean, we are going to feel things. And I'm not sure that's necessarily, because I don't think it's God's desire that we're all faced with life and death situations like that's, you know, we're supposed to experience the sufferings. I feel like what Jesus did on the cross was so that we wouldn't have to do that. If anything, I think the blessings that we have in America, we're supposed to be sharing with other nations so that they don't have to do that.
Also, I think that the Bible, which I don't agree with this at all, talks of
It's a gift to suffer, and the gifts that are a part of suffering and what you learn in suffering and all of that. It's a gift to be in that, and it's something to be. I mean, it's not something to wallow in.
Well, that's just it. I'm not sure I would. How would that be though? If someone felt like I'm it's almost like I'm called to be a martyr. That could be very inward too, rather than being presented with a situation and then you embrace it because you realize, okay, God is in this. I want to glorify Him. I can see that, but to decide, okay, I'm going to live a life of suffering, that could seem a little.
No, yeah, you're punished. I mean, the disciples were overjoyed because they got beaten, but they were spreading the gospel.
I mean, yeah.
It wasn't.
Like Gandhi or Siddhartha Gautama, whatever, Buddha. They lived lives of
but they also lived in a poverty mindset too.
Sure, I'm not like there was obviously problems with the way they were living, but the wisdom that they walked away with.
I'm sure there's perks to it. Yeah, I mean, whenever you deny yourself, it is commendable.
Yeah, I mean, if you willingly deny yourself, you're going to go to a deeper level to find peace and satisfaction than if you don't deny yourself.
So how is that apart from what the gospel says?
What do you mean?
Because
It's counterintuitive to die to self. It's counterintuitive against human nature.
yeah, so why did
Right.
they do it?
To die to self. To willingly.
Human nature doesn't like to die to self.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
Yes.
that's why we don't have the human nature anymore. We have the spiritual nature.
But why did Gandhi and Buddha do it? Why
To-
did they deny themselves?
Because they. I mean, I haven't looked into them in depth, but I'm just assuming it was because they saw their nature of pride and selfishness and arrogance and whatever, and so they wanted to completely empty themselves of that and reach some sort of enlightenment, which was
I think that's
enjoy
what they
the
wanted.
moment.
They wanted some higher spirituality, and they thought that was the ticket to it, was to submit themselves, deny themselves, to gain some heightened.
How is that any different from Christianity?
It's not some heightened experience. It's knowing a person. That's different.
You've been filled with the person of God as authentic suffering happens.
Because even some heightened spiritual experience, it's still all about you. I want to experience this versus I want to know this person. If an experience comes, great, but if not.
I don't know what the verse means when it talks about it. It talks about Peter and it talks about in Hebrews about suffering as to obtain a greater resurrection. It's just an interesting verse. It talks about it in Philippians, and I read it Sunday about, it said some refuse to be released from prison in order to obtain a greater resurrection.
Yes. And he also talks
It's
about
like-
the
you're
thorn
like-
in the thorn in the side.
Yeah.
And being, I boast on my weakness.
Right.
But he did want it to leave. He finally realized he couldn't because God told him it's going to stay.
But I don't know. I still think I still think it's a. I've called it a gift. I still call it a gift. You don't have to look at it as a gift, but I do think it's like a.
It can be a blessing.
Okay, that's another way to put it. Gift, blessing, sure, whatever. But
It can be beneficial.
What do you mean by gift? You mean that you feel that you have the endurance to suffer, or you have a calling to suffer,
no.
or
no.
what do you mean by a gift?
No, that there's things that you learn in suffering that you won't learn in the happiest times of your life.
Absolutely, totally get that. I mean, it says in Hebrews that Jesus learned obedience through what
That's
he
all
suffered.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
And so in suffering, the gift of suffering, you learn those things that you would have never otherwise been able to learn.
absolutely, totally get it.
And so if you've created a doctrine or a mindset around let's not suffer,
Right? I
then
agree.
you will miss out on those hidden truths that will help you evolve as a person.
That's exactly right.
That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
Okay,
So
cool.
I think that's a gift. That's what
I think that's normal Christian life.
I mean,
I don't think that's a gift. That's yeah.
so is normal Christian life not a gift altogether?
Well, yes, it is.
So-
Yeah. Great. It's salvation.
Yeah, sure.
That's like a police officer when he got married the second time. He said, this marriage has gone so much better. We have never had an argument yet since we've been married. And I thought, you have the most shallowest relationship that I've ever heard anybody say. I didn't
Yeah.
say that. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. No, I mean that's true, man. You got to be able to fight.
That's right.
Got to be able to bicker.
Yeah, man. That's fun.
That's true.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you made it to the end, congratulations. I know that was a lot of chewing, basically. No, really hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hope you got a lot out of it, and or got something out of it. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So if you could, contact me on my YouTube channel, or hit me up on Instagram, nate.alger. Be very much appreciated. Love to know your thoughts. Love to talk with you more. So until next time, I'll see you misfits in the next one. Peace.